Welcome to The Growth Project, a podcast brought to you by AMPLOS. Great to be here today. Dr. Drew Brannon, joined by Dr. Cory Shaffer. We are in the studio.
That we are.
Great to be here. Okay, Cory, so we are diving in today, and I'm going to kind of set up this topic a little bit. We're talking about the summertime, which I'm sure, if we were sophisticated enough, as I said that, we would queue up.
Will Smith and summertime. Come on, that's got to be in the wheelhouse.
I mean, there are a few options. But I think
that's the option.
So if you're listening to this, if you want to hit pause, queue up.
Connor, queue up.
Either way. So yeah, we're talking about the summertime, and I'll kind of set it up this way. Although my kids are older now, and they're not really asking this question as much as they used to, or really at all, but they used to always ask me this question. Shortly after they would get out of school, we would be sitting there one day and they would be like, "Dad, do you still go to work in the summer?" And I would say, "Yes, I do. Although there are some professions out there that don't go in the summer. I am not in one of those."
I mean, to be honest, we do a lot of work in college sports. College athletes ask me that question all the time. It's like, "Oh man, come back in, August or September. Like, how was your summer? What'd you do? What'd you do with your time off?" And I'm just kind of like, "What do you mean?
Yeah,
that's not how this works, man."
Yeah, no, we're on in the summer as well. But the fact that my kids asked that question, I loved it then and thought it was hilarious and still do. So yeah, Cory, we're still on in the summer, aren't we?
Yes, we are
on in the summer. But I do think, and that's why we're going to talk about this today, for those of us that are in industries that do work through the summer, it can be a great opportunity for us in a number of respects. And so that's really kind of the focus of today of like, all right, instead of just letting the summer, or what we tend to think of kind of June, July, August, be 3 more months on your calendar, how could we think about this a little bit differently, a little more thoughtfully, intentionally, strategically, in order to really maximize what it could be? So that's where we're headed today with respect to the summer.
Yeah, so I think the first sort of major talking point that we wanted to get into is how summer can be a good opportunity for sort of a seasonal, annual, let's say, reset, and can be for some, depending again maybe on industry and just the seasonality of your work, a time for reflection. So as I introduce it in that way, Drew, which direction you want to take it in?
Well, so here's where my brain goes as I think about kind of this reset thing. There's 2 big things that pop up here. Most people have some form of kind of like a goal or a target or a plan they're working toward. And we'll say in this case, we're talking about over like kind of a calendar year type format. One of the more common mistakes people make is they set that goal or that objective, maybe even like the latter part of the prior year, and they begin working toward it in the first part of this year. And then they really aren't giving it a ton of thought until the end of the year. It's like, hey, I'm chasing this thing all year long. I'm hoping that I'm going to be there at the end in the place I want to be, but they aren't doing nearly enough assessing, diagnosing, adjusting, whatever you want to call it. This is a great time to do that. This is a really, really great time to do it if you're halfway through your year. And whether that's kind of your maybe professional type goals that you might be thinking about, it could be your personal stuff as well. Maybe you set out this year to do a bunch of things personally. This is a vital time to pause and just see where you are.
Yeah. And before we even jumped on here and, kind of press record, I was thinking for myself, like, to be honest, I'm probably more reflective in the winter and sort of towards the close of the year and as a new year starts up. And I stand by that. I think there's truth to it. But I also am pretty deliberate and diligent. This time of year, I'm with you. It's the halfway point. It serves as a natural time to check in.
It's halftime.
Yeah, exactly. So just to kind of take stock of first 6 months of the year, looking back, what's been accomplished, what has been done, what's working, what's not working, what do I want to tweak or adjust as we, kind of turn the page into the back half of the year or the second half kickoff, so to speak.
Right.
So yeah, I'm with you. I think there's opportunity here for sort of a mid-year check-in. That obviously is how it works within the calendar. I think there's, to a degree, a seasonality of this as well. A lot of industries, a lot of companies, the pace does seem to slow a bit during the summer. And so if that works for you in the industry that you're in, then hey, maybe with a little bit more of a slower pace and some free time, it sort of naturally lends to the opportunity to do this, because that's one of the reasons why I think people would tell you they don't check in more regularly. Is like, I'm too busy, right? The pace is too fast. How do I slow down and do that? Well, now the pace is slower. You've already slowed down. So let's do it.
Yeah, great point. And I think even let's go back to what you said a second ago as we're thinking about like, okay, this is halftime. And we'll do a sports example here. Everybody, I think a lot of the folks that listen to our podcast are aware we're heavy in the college football space. How do we generally think about and how do we designate the best coaches in college football? And it's not just about one metric, but one of the metrics that I think matters the most is who can adjust the best. So when you go into halftime and you're able to get off the field and have a few moments to kind of huddle with your staff, and you can look at the iPad now with the new technology, you can look at the iPad a little bit more extensively and see what's happening. We can get together with our guys and talk about what they're seeing out there. Whoever adjusts the best often wins the game. Mm-hmm. And like, that's kind of where we are right now. And so for leaders out there that are listening to this, of what are you doing to adjust and to help your team adjust so that the second half of the year gives you the best chance possible to accomplish the things you wanted to?
Yeah, the one thing I'm not even pushing back on, but just like a little bit of a wrench I'll throw in that. When I hear you describe it in that way, I'm almost assuming like, well, it sounds like it's a close game. So what I would say is I think really good coaches, in my observation, even when they're winning, they still go into halftime and make adjustments.
For sure.
And that's how the second half is usually pretty crisp, and maybe you widen the lead as opposed to like let the other team come back in it.
Very true.
Just making that point around, hey, even if the year has started really well for you, you can still do this.
Totally.
In fact, you should still do this, I would argue.
Yeah, because, okay, let's go with the college football example. What's one of the most important things to do in college football right now? Build depth. Well, it's hard to build. Like if you go into halftime, you're up by 2 touchdowns. You're not playing your 2s and 3s up by 2 scores. You're not doing that. But if we can go in up by 2 scores, maybe go up in by 17 points and make adjustments really, really well, we come out, score on our first possession, kind of widen that gap. Now we're getting close to, like get the 3s in there, get the 2s in there. Yep. Now we're building depth. So you're there's value to that. Yep. There's value to putting your foot on the gas pedal.
And similarly, if the year hasn't gotten off to a great start, or hey, we're down at halftime, it's not like we just throw in the towel on the year or the game, right? There's hey, let's see if we can kind of climb back into this. What can we do to sort of right the ship? Even at this point, like if it's winning the game is out of reach, but like just to show that there's progress being made, and so I mean, again, you can see the parallels there. So absolutely worth doing. The reset piece of this, I think. So that's in terms of using this as like an opportunity to reflect. I think the reset, I hope a lot of people feel that. Again, there's seasonality to it, right? Some industries are peaking during the summer.
Yeah, right.
And there's no reset.
Yeah. Could be your busy season. We
correct.
Understand that.
And so I acknowledge that for a lot of people, a lot of industries. I think us, to a degree, we're trying to use this as a little bit of a reset, especially since you just brought it up with like college football looming in the distance. I think we understand, and probably you and Milt especially, given how long you guys have been doing this, like, man, it's about to go, right? When that calendar flips to August and then especially September, it gets going fast and the pace becomes so quick. This is the time, right? With that, in the distance to kind of reset things and recharge a little bit. And so I don't know if you feel that.
Totally.
I've started to feel that, and I'm only, a couple years into this. It's interesting. I was even contrasting, like, again, I'm talking from a sports standpoint, so bear with me here. If you think about the seasonality of sports, well, what's really the only sport that goes on during the summer, truly all summer, is baseball. Think about the pace of baseball, right? Like arguably, I know they're making changes to make the game faster, but it is still slow.
Yes.
In contrast to, you think about football in the horizon in the fall and everything that kind of comes from there, like things just get fast.
Yep.
So to me, that's always what I feel like, beginning in the spring, it's just like, oh, things are starting to slow down. It's baseball season.
Yep.
And then as baseball starts to close out, it's like things start getting fast again. So,
yep. No, and I think one final comment on that, Cory. There's a quote we've used a bunch in football over the years by a guy named Henry Clay. And I'm not entirely sure who Henry Clay is. I should know. But the quote is, he says, "The time will come when winter will ask you what you were doing all summer." And that's kind of what you're saying a little bit right there. It's like once the season comes, or if you're thinking about your calendar year, that would essentially be kind of like Q4. Like, when you get to Q4, the odds are you put yourself in shape to either look good or look not so good. Part of it was what happened during, part of Q2 and Q3.
Well, the other thing I'll mention here, and then we can move forward. I always use the analogy, like college kids get this. It's like, how rested you are going into finals week is probably going to determine how you come out of finals week.
Because you're not going to rest during finals week.
Exactly. But if you go, classes end, bender on the weekend, straight into finals week and long days and long nights and studying and cramming and all that, you're already spent before you've even started it. That's probably not going to go well.
No.
Right. So it's a little bit of that, like you're saying, is just like, man, if you've already burnt the candle from both ends heading into Q4 is probably not going to go well.
Yeah.
So how you go into the back half of the year or the final quarter of the year, however you want to think about that matters, but it matters then what are you doing now?
Mm-hmm.
So
absolutely. Okay, let's get into this next one here. And there's going to be three kind of big areas we want to cover today. The second one is kind of the category of I'll just call kind of travel and perspective. And look, again, I think you made a really good point. We realize that traveling in the summer might be even more difficult for you if it is your busy season. I think the nuance here, and we realize not all of our listeners have families. Many do, but some don't. And one is certainly not better than the other. But kids are not in school in the summer. And so let's talk about travel a little bit and the kind of the value and importance of that if you do have kids as they're older. And I'd say old enough to travel without it just being parenting in another location.
Yeah, I'm going to let you take this one. Travel for me with kids right now is parenting in another location. So,
but let's talk about what that is and why. And I'll tell you, as a parent of one kid who's already in college and two others who will, before I know it, kind of be there, you definitely do not get those days back. And everybody who's listening to this knows that. You've got this kind of fixed window of time in life where you can kind of hopefully find a way. And like, we're not saying that travel needs to equal like, oh, we're headed to Switzerland this summer or something like that. If you are, good for you. But what an incredible time to make memories with your family. And you can do that at Lake Hartwell. You can do that at the beach. You can do it so many different places. And the thing that I will say that is to kind of keep on your radar for everybody as well, and those that have had kids that have progressed through high school and college who know this, that life has only got, like, it's hard. School's hard. And kids are different in the summer than they are during the school year. There's a lot they don't have on them. And I think that as a result of that, it just provides such an awesome opportunity for families to make the most of it. Mm-hmm. So travel can be a bunch of things here. I'm just speaking to like one specific form of it where I think it's a awesome time. And I do want to challenge our listeners to think about, with respect to the family example, how can you find ways to create some great memories with your family in the summer?
Yeah, and travel, I think it may or may not be related to sort of I guess a little bit of a subtopic here within this, but like just nature, being outside, right?
Yeah,
a lot of the time the travel is to a location where we're spending the majority of our time is spent outdoors, in nature in a lot of ways. And you don't have to necessarily travel to do that, but that is one of the things that comes with this time of year. And my wife would tell you, I don't always love outside in the summer. It is so stinking hot in the South. Spring and fall are my sweet spots. But there's still plenty of time spent outside, and there's boatloads of research to support being in nature, green spaces, water. Like all of these things are really, really good for us. Mm-hmm. It's actually really fascinating, some of the research, and I don't have any specific studies to point to, but there's just a lot of good that can come from that. And, how that connects to this idea of like perspective, I think is pretty cool. So where do you want to take it from there?
Yeah, I just think that what we're really saying here is finding a way to kind of shift. I think when you shift your perspective, right? I mean, I think that's exactly what we're saying of like, hey, when I find a way to take a step back, and instead of doing kind of my normal week in and week out here, like we're gonna take a vacation. And I hear like we work hard, and I'm all about working hard. But when I hear people say things like, I haven't taken a vacation in 4 years, and it's a kind of a badge of honor type thing, it's really not a great idea.
Yeah.
It's really not a great idea. Now, unfortunately, there's some folks out there that can't take a vacation. We respect that, and that's unfortunate. But those of you who can, I just want people to recognize the value of that and how healthy it is. Because again, what do we say? It's halftime. And if you can, while at halftime, take a step back and get out of your normal kind of treadmill life and do something different, it will pay dividends down the road.
Yeah, agreed. And I mean, again, I describe this like we're in a stage of life where we're not doing big kind of week-long trips, to the beach or anything like that. We do a lot of like weekends.
Yeah.
These are like bite-sized little opportunities for us to do what you're talking about.
Which is great, and all you need.
Yeah, shift the perspective, maybe get out of town, not necessarily, but the point is to slow down, to shift, to get away, as you said it, from kind of the normal routine. And that's the stage of life that we're in. It'd be nice at some point to take a nice week, but like we're just not there. So we do these little, overnight trips or a weekend here or there. And it's sort of at the stage of life that my kids are in, like a great dose of them to get out of their normal routine, to experience something new. I personally, I find so much value, like there is such a calming, for me at least, like peaceful, like around water.
Oh yeah.
Right. So to get to a lake or to go to a beach or something like that, I found for me is one of the best things that I can do in terms of really actually shifting perspective and feeling refreshed. So we try to be intentional about that kind of stuff when we can be. It's not always possible. To be honest, I don't know if we have any trips like that planned for this summer, but there will be plenty of opportunities for us just to get away from the normal day to day. And that's kind of the point. Yeah.
And I think, so there's a construct actually that is what we're talking about of just the whole principle of just oscillation. That's kind of what we're saying here. And yeah, if you need to get the visual of your oscillating fan, that is exactly, it is just that of how it's like, it's turning and it's turning. But the idea is, think of yourself, let's put yourself in the position of the fan, right? If it's not oscillating and it's just sitting in one place and it is just blowing air, if you try to do that indefinitely, you burn out, you get sick of it, it gets repetitive, you get frustrated. Like you need to oscillate. And that's kind of what we're saying of like, find a way to do that, not just in the summer, but summer often represents an ideal time to do it.
Yeah.
It shifts your perspective. Let's get to our last one here. So now we're talking about, and there's a little bit of a similar vein, but I think it's important to get it more into the granular here of this idea of like rest, play, and recharge. Rest, play, and recharge. So Cory, what are some initial thoughts on what that might look like, or how a person could do that effectively?
Yeah, the reality is first of all, there are going to just be individual differences here, right? Like that's going to look different for everyone. What rest means, what play is, that kind of thing. So I know, just for example, one that'll probably resonate with quite a few of our listeners, but during the summer months especially, how many people find themselves outside playing golf?
Yeah.
Right? Like that's play. For an adult, in their 40s, 50s, 30s, doesn't matter, right? Like we're not running outside playing tag, but how many people get out and play golf or pickleball or those kinds of things, right? Like that type of play, even seasoned individuals well into life and careers and so on, like it's kind of interesting, right? Like how that now exists more just because the weather's nice and we're outside a little bit more and that type of thing. So I think that's a piece and there's, a ton of good for just learning and understanding what are hobbies and things that you can do that bring you joy, and that sort of fit under that category of play. They don't even necessarily have to be competitive. I know pickleball and golf can be competitive. That's not the point, right? It's just about being outside and doing something and challenging yourself and that type of thing.
Yeah. Well, and part of what you're saying there is take advantage of the opportunity of longer days.
Right.
It's dark. I mean, we're not quite there. I think June 20th is the longest day of the year typically, when it gets dark at like 9 o'clock at night. And you think about the contrast of that to the doldrums of like late November, early December, where it's 5:15 and it's dark.
Right.
You think about how much less you see your neighbors. Think about how much less people are out watering their plants and walking around. And these sound like kind of just benign things, but they really aren't, because what we're saying here is this promotes community, it promotes fellowship, movement. It's just really healthy stuff.
Yeah.
For us.
Yeah. And I mean, this is one too, where if you do have kids, like my kids are at a very fun age for
totally
wanting to do things. I mean, I was sort of poking fun at like adults aren't out playing tag, but like that's what my kid wants to do. You know what I mean? He wants to throw water balloons and like run through a sprinkler. And so what am I doing?
Yeah.
I'm running through sprinklers and throwing water balloons, and tapping into that, and just, the joy that comes from doing that, especially, with your kids. It's hard to imagine that doesn't feel like it fills up your cup.
Sure. Well, there's a whole body of research on play.
Right.
I mean, there just is. And we are so good, especially in this country, at taking ourselves too seriously. This is such a great time of year. I think one reason why adults can find a lot of enjoyment in summer is, what does it kind of bring us back to is like memories, right? Mm-hmm. Great memories of summers when we were a kid and the fun that came along with that. And so I think there's an opportunity there. And frankly, it's a miss on our part if we aren't doing something with that, if we aren't kind of connecting to the memories of that. And then I think we then begin to kind of bear the responsibility a little bit as parents is, well, I want to give that to my kids. Like if I look back and I have great memories of summer and all that entailed, well, then like I want to afford that to them, and by helping design and creating examples of how they can do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I think if there's sort of a take-home message here, it's there needs to be some deliberate or intent nature around this.
Yep.
And even if maybe you recognize after having listened to this, like, hey, I'm not doing this very well right now. Well, at least have the courage to experiment and try some things. Like you got to figure out what works for me. What helps me feel rested? What helps me feel recharged? Where can I add elements of play to what I'm doing? Again, it's going to look different for everybody. Yeah. And if the way that you recharge is you just, sit in a hammock in your backyard, fantastic. You're probably doing more of that now than you do in January.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the point just being like, hey,
you might not be, you prefer those winter months,
just take advantage of it, So I think that's what's important. Again, find what works for you, prioritize it. Ideally, I think that's important.
But I want to go back to that word you just said, because it's interesting that you went there, because I was going to do the same exact thing of whether you use the word thoughtfully, intentionally, deliberately, they're all of the same, kind of flavor, obviously. And that's just a really, really, I think, vital way to be. And, it might be, kind of the weak take on even a podcast like this would be like you guys are doing a whole conversation around summer, and my response would be absolutely. And that's the whole point is, if you're going to design a life in which you are doing just that, where you're thoughtfully navigating what you're doing and how you're doing it, then you take periods of time in the year very seriously. And so, and that's not meant to be like a hard transition of, wait, you were just talking about joy and fun. It's like, well, yeah, like I'm thinking seriously about how do you create that? Mm-hmm. But I want our listeners, and as we think about kind of I guess what we might call kind of the grassroots movement and growth of the Growth Project is, if there's anything we're getting right, I hope that our listener community are increasingly living lives that are thoughtful and deliberate.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. And not to be insensitive again, too, to like if you're in an industry that's kind of flipped
Yeah,
the seasonality.
That's right.
A lot of these principles are still going to apply during different months of the year. Again, there's some challenges now maybe associated with that. Shorter days and maybe less time spent outside because of weather and so on. But a lot of the principles remain true.
Yep. And just because that's well said. And the thing I want to press on at least a little bit is let's think about the objections definitely for a minute, because there's always objections. And so challenge yourself when the voice in your head that pops up and says, oh, but I can't. Challenge that. Don't allow that quick kind of dismissive voice that might be in your mind to be the thing that wins the day. Find ways to create some version of these things that we're talking about.
Yeah, and I guess too, as we're thinking about it, I can even challenge to what I just said a minute ago, and it'll apply to us later in the year. But if this is your busy time period, recovery, rest, recharging is still important.
Oh yeah,
it's just
totally.
it's in tighter windows because now it's kind of day to day. It's a grind, long days, long hours, whatever, crazy busy. Okay, well, what you do at night now, and how you rest up and recover, recharge for just the next day, like that matters.
Yes.
There's a premium on it,
Right.
Your ability to do that again and again and again throughout the summer months, if this is your busy season, is probably going to determine what the summer months end up looking like, right? From like a performance or an output standpoint. Even for us, right, if things really pick up, let's say in the fall, well, it's just as important then that like, hey, when we get opportunities to disconnect or unplug or reset or recharge, you got to do it.
Yep.
Yep. It's just, again, you're working with tighter windows and the margins are a little bit smaller, maybe because of the pace. But again, the point being here that like the principles that we're talking about are still true.
Let me make one last comment on that. And then I know we need to kind of like move to a close here. Here's one of the observations I've made in a lot of working professionals over the years about maybe why they don't do some of these things. And that is, right, so classic behaviorism often prevails here. And that is we get conditioned a certain way. And you think about the earliest years of your career, well, what do those typically mean? Well, you're young, you've got a lot of energy, you've got a lot of ambition, and those are the prime type of things that often can effectively compensate for bad habits. And as a result of that, you might not really do any things like this of like, oh, hey, through my 20s, maybe even through part of my 30s, I didn't do any kind of like halftime reset because I didn't really feel like I needed it. Mm-hmm. And to be candid, there might have been some truth to that. Mm-hmm. And so what you're effectively doing is you're training yourself during the decade plus, perhaps more, that, oh, I don't need that. And you get to a little bit different chapter of the book or later stages of your career, and you've got bad habits. You aren't doing these things, and yet you need to be doing these things. So just recognize, think about where you are on kind of your arc of your career, and recognize that, hey, there's a real possibility that you didn't do these things early, and yet you really need to do them to set yourself up well for what lies ahead.
Well said.
Okay, so just one more time. So what's that song again that they need to be sure they look up?
Summertime.
Summertime.
Will Smith.
Summertime.
And DJ Jazzy Jeff from Fresh Prince. Come on, guys.
So this podcast was inspired by...
Absolutely. That's what's going on in my mind. Throw a dart at any country music song and you'll probably hit something about summer. But
that's true.
We're going outside the box here.
Okay, well, we are always grateful to our listening community. Let us hear from you on Apple Podcast Reviews, Spotify. We always love to hear how we can improve or what you might be getting out of these conversations. But hope that today is one that can be worthwhile for you. And we look forward to the next chance we get to connect on the Growth Project. Thank you.